without further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight on in. And guys, the first guy that I really want to talk about is South Carolina's Xavier Legette. He's a 6'1", 221-pound senior. Those are official numbers right now. Former four-star prospect, the number 17 athlete in his class. He was the 10th in athleticism, 10th ranked guy in athleticism score at the combine, and that's just something I want to throw in there for perspective. It's important to note, though, before we really dive into Legette, I want to kind of set the basis of this conversation with this. Legette had next to no production his entire career, less than 200 yards all 4 years until his fifth-year senior year, where he had 1,255 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. So that'll be the basis for this conversation. And the first thing that we want to talk about, as always, are his route running, his release. I'm going to start with you, Cooper. What did you really notice when it came to Legette's route running?
Well, he is not like new Carolina Panthers receiver Deontay Johnson. I can tell you that right now.
2.5 minutes into the show, and we're already going
You
there.
think we could get through an intro on this show and not even mention, with 2 Panthers fans on here, that we just traded for Deontay Johnson? Come on, man. No, I'm pretty excited about that. I love Deontay Johnson. I think he's been held back by his situation the last few years, and he's an incredible route runner and always open, and just what hopefully Bryce Young needs to get his early development back on track. But this is not a free agent.
Are you guys need now as a quarterback, running back, some offensive linemen, the defense, new owner? You know, you guys are taking steps in the right direction,
man. Just take the wins when we get them, because they have been few and far between for a while now. But this is not a free agency show. There are a lot of those. In fact, my friend Mike Cash is doing one, I think, at 8:30 right after this. So go check him out. But yeah, there's a lot of free agency shows. That's not really what we do. We get in here and we scout and we talk about the film. So we're going to continue plugging right along with our rookie series. And as far as the route running goes with Xavier Legette, I'll get us back on topic here. I didn't expect to be impressed, honestly. You try to go into a film watch pretty unbiased and just go where the film leads. But everything that I knew about the guy is like, okay, didn't produce it all till his 5th year. He's big, he's fast, he's a contested catch guy. I didn't expect to see a lot of great route running, and I didn't. So I've been doing this long enough to kind of know when I see a profile, like, what's probably coming. And in this case, I was right. There were maybe 3. I watched 3 games, every snap of the all 22, and I saw maybe 3 routes where I was like, oh yeah, that was a nice route. Nice, crisp, planted his foot, snappy at the break, manipulated the defense, got open 3 times in 3 games. Most of his routes I thought were pretty rounded off. Took him a lot of steps to decelerate if it was a comeback route. So overall, I felt like very unrefined, very stiff in his hips a little bit, just kind of not overly impressive. And versus press, he's a big guy, so I'm expecting, okay, he's gonna win versus press. Not really that much winning against press either. I felt like he would just have a guy on his hip, and that guy would stay on his hip, and he wasn't doing anything to get him off of his hip. And that's why he had so many contested catch opportunities, because he was a big target. And when everything else would fail, Rattler would kind of throw up a jump ball to him. But most of the time, it wasn't like, oh, he won on his route and he's open, so he earned the target, and it was an uncontested catch there. I just didn't see very many of those. So, yeah, we just this week started to implement a grading system. We're still in the experimentation phase with like how much we're going to weight each trait and all that kind of stuff. But we graded these guys on a scale of 1 to 10 for these traits that we're talking about. And just to give you guys a little bit of context on this, a 4 out of 10 would have been like average college, like what you would expect from a college level player. So a 6 is what you would expect from an average NFL player. So 6 out of 10 might feel like, oh, that's disrespectful or whatever. That's a low grade. But 6 out of 10, that's like, okay, he's NFL caliber in this area. And then 7 is like, man, he's good. He's above average even for an NFL player. So we really like 9 and 10. This is for like the elite of the elite. We didn't give out a lot of these. So just to give you a little context on the grading. But for me, I gave him a 5 on the route running. So acceptable, but a little bit below average for an NFL route runner. And I gave him a 4 for the release versus press coverage. So average college level, but pretty well below what you would expect from a starting NFL wide receiver. So yeah, kind of fun to be able to put numbers on it. And it'll be interesting to have that to go back to at the end of the year and say, all right, this is how I graded this guy. This is how I graded that guy. So I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to pass it off. Rupert, what did you notice?
The exact same thing. I think he was a little bit better at the stem of his route, but where I really think that he was really held back was his release package just wasn't really there. I saw the same thing, struggled against press, had guys in his hip pocket pretty much every route. When guys were playing off is when he would be able to get open. He was able to stop pretty quickly and, kind of cut in or come back on a comeback route, which was a little surprising for his size. So I agree with you. I think he was, kind of middle of the pack. Not the worst route runner I've seen in the class, but definitely below pretty much everyone else.
I might have been a little lower on him. I thought he was really stiff in his routes. I mean, I noted some of the same things you did, Cooper. He rounded off his routes a lot. It seemed like he would try to give head fakes, little jab steps to get the defender off angle and on his hip pocket, and they never really worked out for him. I mean, they did, like you said, maybe 2 or 3 times, but he just didn't look like a solid route runner to me. I didn't really like his release package. I mean, I gave him less than you guys did. I gave him a 4 in release and route running, which is average for a college wide receiver. I didn't think this was an area that was a strong suit for him. One thing that I kind of want to talk about is he, and I know we've made this comp off air, but I want to bring this to actually this podcast. Is he and the next Jonathan Mingo? Now we're talking about Carolina wide receivers. I know we just kind of tease that a little bit. Somebody
Don't make me frown. You too, man.
Doesn't really do a whole lot, gets way overhyped, and then he gets in the NFL, and you're like, oh, this guy was exactly who we thought he was pre-combine.
I like him a little bit better than I liked Mingo last year. I mean, I just didn't get it. There was no competition. I mean, this isn't a Jonathan Mingo podcast. There was no competition at Ole Miss when he was there. And his best season was like 800 yards, and it was as a senior. But so at least like this year, Legette put up that 1,200, 1,300 yard. Like he at least had one dominant season. Mingo never had that. I thought his ball skills were a lot better, which we're not talking about that yet, but his ball skills to me were a lot better than what I ever saw out of Jonathan Mingo. So they both are athletic and both were pretty unproductive for most of their college career. So I can see that comp. But I think the difference, one is Mingo was more expensive. He was going like early second round of rookie drafts, was a top 5 wide receiver in the class for most people last year. Whereas Legette, you can usually get him in the 3rd round of rookie drafts right now. And then the other difference is that I feel like while they're both very athletic, I think Legette knows how to use his athleticism a little bit more at the catch point. Whereas Mingo was more of a yak guy. He wasn't like, if he had one high level trait, it was going to be his yards after catch. Whereas I feel like for Legette, it's ball skills, which is more important to me. So,
well, let's go ahead and talk about that, because that was an area that I think was his strong suit, right? His body control, his hands, his contested catch ability, his catch radius. I mean, some of these things, just because we've already teased our ranking system a little bit, I gave him a 7.5 in contested catch, which is a little above average for an NFL wide receiver. I gave him an 8 across the board for catch radius and body control. I think his ability to high point the ball, to make really tough catches, to utilize his size to go up and get the ball was a real strong suit for him. He's got great body control, and that was all over his film. But what did you guys notice? I'll start with you, Rupert. Did you see the same thing, or did you see something different?
Yeah, the exact same thing. He's the exact same size, I think, as A.J. Brown, and he kind of looked like him, going up between defenders and snatching the ball out of the air. And he looks really fluid when he's jumping and high pointing the ball. He's able to kind of contort a little bit, and he tracked the ball very well as well.
What about you, Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, this was we're trying to withhold the word elite until it's actually true. But it was pretty close. I mean, I gave him an 8.5 for catch radius, 8.5 for body control, 8 for contested catch, which those would grade out as being like great, even by NFL standards in those areas. So there were the way he was contorting his body to catch stuff that was not thrown right on his frame, the way he was able to go up and high point, like legitimately high point, like higher than the cornerback could actually get to, like, ha, can't reach me. I'm just going to catch it over your head. He has those kind of ball skills, and one of the better guys in the class that we've studied so far from that standpoint. So maybe not quite elite, but very, very high level in this category. And then for hands, I gave him a 7, which is still really good grade, but just I'd noticed, I think, 2 drops in the 3 games that I watched. So I gave him a 7 instead of an 8 for hands, but he was mostly catching it with his hands. They were concentration drops. It wasn't like he had a technique issue or he was body catching or anything like that. So still, I would say overall pretty good hands.
And I think a lot of that speaks to his athleticism, right? Just kind of springing forward a little bit. I mean, he's got that size speed combo, and he knows how to utilize his size. I didn't note him of being somebody that played weaker than his size dictated he should play. So I think he's got the athleticism that you want to see for a wide receiver. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he was almost like a 10 out of 10 RAS guy at the combine, and that shows on tape too, I'd say. I mean, even speed-wise, he consistently on these deeper routes had DBs on their heels. I mean, if you're not running great routes, but you put up 1,300 yards in the SEC, that tells me like you're doing really good at something. And for him, I mean, just the speed on those deep routes, the ball skills on those contested catches, like those were the ways that he was winning. And I mean, honestly, like if he could develop in using that speed better, like get the DB on his heels and then stick that foot in the ground and all of a sudden snap off into a corner route or into a dig, like that would be really, really hard to guard. Or even the comeback route. Like if he could master the comeback route and sinking his hips and stopping on a dime and watch the DB go flying by him just as a counter to that speed, that in and of itself, like that's limited fantasy upside, but there's a role there in the NFL for a guy like that. So sorry.
Well, I think the ceiling, the outlier that we all think of is DK Metcalf, right? Somebody that tested explosively at the combine, is big, is fast. But when we watched this film, like every analyst was like, this guy doesn't really run great routes. So not that I'm saying by any stretch of the imagination that Xavier Legette is going to be DK Metcalf. I don't believe that at all. But like that's the ceiling, right? Like that's what you want a guy like that to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, because DK Metcalf, even though it didn't show up, I guess, on his college tape, I don't know. I wasn't studying DK Metcalf when he was a prospect. I got into content creation later than that, but in the NFL, he sure is a pretty good route runner. You know, he's not just winning with athleticism. So Legette would have to develop in that area, I think.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I didn't see a lot of, so I wouldn't necessarily count this, I guess, as a strength or a weakness, was his yards after the catch ability. I gave him a 5 on that, which was acceptable, right? According to our rankings. A lot of times I just didn't see it. It wasn't on his film. He would catch a ball and he wouldn't really break loose from a tackle. There were several times that I noted where like he was one-on-one with a defender on the outside and he just either went out of bounds or kind of got tackled by the sideline, where I would have wanted him to break that up the field, break down that first defender and keep moving, but he just didn't do that. Did you guys see, I'll start with you, Rupert. Did you see any yak ability from him at all?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of, a product of the system he was in. Like he wasn't really used kind of in yak situations. Like he didn't get a lot of screens, didn't get a lot of like mesh routes, crossing routes, things like that. I saw him, I think 3 times kind of show that yak ability, break some tackles, get up the field, and he looked good in those situations. And also, I think a product of having guys draped on him, so he catches the ball and then gets tackled right away because the guy's right on his hip. But I think he has that in his game. It just didn't show up a ton.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't really knock him for it, but I'd say he's probably a little above average due to his athleticism. He's a big guy. He's tough to bring down. Cornerbacks, in the 3 instances I saw in 2 games I watched, they were just kind of falling off of him.
I actually saw quite a few tunnel screens. So I felt like I saw some reverses, jet sweep type of thing. So I felt like they were trying to get him in situations where he could use yards after the catch because he was one of the better athletes on the football team and he wasn't winning in the short to intermediate routes. So they had to get the ball in his hands somehow. So it was a lot of this kind of gadgety stuff that they were giving him. And I didn't really see him do a whole lot with it. Now, granted, he played some pretty good defenses. Like I watched the Georgia game. I watched Clemson, Florida. Like all those teams had pretty solid defenses. And so they were kind of rallying and gang tackling. And it was kind of like, what did you expect? Was he going to break 4 tackles? Like, no, probably not. So I don't know how much more he could have done. But that being said, I think I saw him break 1 tackle in 3 games. And I gave him a pretty low score for quickness, which I think plays into it. So he's fast in a straight line, but he's not very quick in short areas. So he's not really going to make a lot of guys miss in those situations after the catch. So it's kind of like if a tunnel screen opens up and he's kind of got the Red Sea parted in front of him, he's fast and he can house it. And he's big, so maybe he breaks a tackle, but I don't think he's really making anybody miss. And if you look at the underlying metrics like yards after catch per attempt and things like that, he grades pretty low in most of those things. So I also gave him a 5 in this.
And just to wrap up run blocking, I noticed that he was somebody that, he was holding his blocks well for some of the run and pass plays that I saw him actually blocking for. I didn't think this was an area that was a weakness for him. Like I said earlier, I feel like he utilizes his size well. He's got some strength to him. So did you guys see the same thing? Did you guys see some run blocking maybe that I didn't see?
Yeah, I thought he was actually good in this area. Size really helps, but he was willing to get in there. He, trying, walk in like at the inside angle, if the running back's trying to run up the middle or get on the outside if they're trying to go outside. So I kind of thought I saw like, that dog in him, which, a lot of NFL teams are really going to like and probably convince themselves to draft him higher than they probably should.
Yeah, so between that and like fighting through contact on routes, I thought he did pretty good at both of those things, which he's like 220 or something. He's not just tall, he's one of the bigger bodied wide receivers in the class. So it makes sense. I gave him a pretty good score for physicality. So overall, I will say, just as we're wrapping up talking about this, our model that we're still tweaking and, we'll see, but we have weighted it to where route running is the most important because this is our philosophy. Route running, that's how you earn targets. That's how you get volume. That's how you score fantasy points. Secondary is ball skills, which he was obviously very good in. And then athleticism and yards after catch is a little bit less important than route running and ball skills to us. And so when you factor in our grades and those weights, our tape score for him came out to average a 61.94 out of 100, which would grade him out as an average backup in the NFL. So, or average backup on your fantasy team, not a guy that you're going to want to start consistently in your fantasy lineup. And I feel comfortable with that. Like I think unless he developed as a route runner, I don't think he is going to be a guy that you want to plug in your fantasy starting lineup. So, that's where we're at with him. About a 62 out of 100, which grades out to a backup on your fantasy team at this point. So